we've got two more. We're going to do, oh, actually, three more. We're going to do two, and then we're going to have another break. And there'll be room for Q&A at the end, so make sure you're thinking of all your questions for all of our participants later on. I hope you can all stay for that. So next up, we've got illustrator Amy Evans, here behind me. And we've got Faisal Mushtaq here, lecturer in neurobiology. So welcome to them both.
Thank you. Do we have any mics? Do we have mics?
Handheld one.
Yeah, can I have a handheld one, please? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for the introduction. So my name is Faisal Mushtaq. I'm a cognitive psychologist by background. A lot of the stuff I do is around cognitive neuroscience. So I try to understand how the brain influences behavior. And one of the things that's happened in my relatively short research career so far is my area, my research discipline has been fundamentally transformed by this thing here, which I'm sure many of you will have seen before. This is a virtual reality headset. It's an Oculus Rift. And this thing has made a lot of the experiments, a lot of the work that we do as neuroscientists, as cognitive psychologists, redundant. So a lot of the experiments that we create, we create sort of elaborate sort of experimental designs to look at how human behavior can be measured, tracked, and then try to generalize that to the real world. And some of the problems that we sort of find in that is the things, the behaviors that we measure in the laboratory don't always translate to real-world behavior. But VR here has the potential to really transform a lot of that, because the types of experiments that we create in these systems are certainly more closer to the real world, more immersive. We can get very good measures of performance using these. We record everything via sort of computer device, and we'll give you a demonstration here. Sorry, it's a bit of feedback. And yeah, literally sort of this seems to be the future for our area. So the past year or so, we've been designing our experiments around VR. And this is where sort of the collaboration with Amy has come through. But just want to tell you just a very small, very short story about my research. So being a neuroscientist, we publish in sort of peer-reviewed journals. And as you know, not many people read them, right? Generally sort of speaking. If you're in a specialist area, you get maybe sort of a few, handful of people who understand that work will peer review it, critique it, and so on. Something really bizarre happened to me about sort of 4 or 5 months ago. And this is where we'll show you the website link. We actually had people reading my research, which isn't always a good thing, as you'll see in a second. So we'll have the website up. Got a bit of a delay. Yeah, there you go. Right. So this is the article that came out on the basis of some of the research that we had conducted. In Guardian, Guardian Science, virtual reality headsets could put children's health at risk. And that was, there's some quotations in there from me around sort of the type of research that we did, but we didn't approve this sort of headline. So as a result of this sort of headline, we actually, for the very first time, maybe the last time in my career, we were headline news across all the VR sort of websites, across many of the tech websites out there. And our research, a very small sort of pilot study, is published around using VR for children. It's published in a sort of a report and then picked up by the mainstream media. And it taught me quite a lot around sort of scientific communication and the importance of getting out the key elements of your research, getting that communicated to the general public effectively. And that's sort of around the same sort of time when we had this sort of a Cultural Institute sort of initiative being pushed forward. And that's where I thought, well, actually, this would be a really good way of me getting some of the research out in a sort of a effective and appropriate sort of way. So this particular sort of study was looking at how, looking at the effects of wearing a VR headset on children, looking at their balance and their eye strain as a result of sort of using these systems. And what we found is that generally most children perfectly sort of fine, but maybe 1 or 2 children had a few sort of issues around wearing VR headsets for 20 minutes. So what we wanted to do is sort of public engagement work on the back of this is to try to sort of sort of explain to children how to use these technologies in a responsible sort of way. And that was really my sort of objective, or maybe I didn't know it at the time when I first started speaking to Amy, is that we wanted to try to produce something that was similar to this sort of theme of research, building on this type of work and getting that out to children. And the idea is that the work that Amy will show us now will be used in our public engagement activities with children in Bradford and Leeds, who are inevitably in the next few years going to be using these systems quite a lot. So I'll pass over to Amy now, if that's okay. Amy will show you what we've been working on.
Oh, that one that is on. Right. Apologies, I'm a little bit nervous today, but so I do apologise now if I climb up a little bit with stage fright. So I'll give a very brief introduction to sort of what I do, my work, and why in particular I've enjoyed this collaboration. So I'm a digital illustrator, so I work almost exclusively on the computer, using software akin to like Photoshop, Illustrator, etc., etc. And in particular, I enjoy creating very bright, colourful artwork that tries to appeal to kids and adults alike, but it's very playful, a little bit mischievous, and generally a lot of people, I try to make people smile with it. So for this project, for this sort of collaboration, one of the first things we did was I went up to the VR lab and had a play. So in particular, things like Google Tilt Brush. If anybody hasn't experienced this yet, if you get a chance to try this, I would really highly recommend it, because it is absolutely fantastic sort of experience. But from there, it was then that I realised that VR has, in combination with the work that Faisal's been doing with children, is that VR has a lot of potential for a lot of things. But as the headline in the article suggested, I think a lot of the time people misunderstand, one, the benefits, and two, the risks. So that's why working with Faisal and Mark, we sort of developed a set of benefits and guidelines. And the idea was to create a tactile, physical thing that people could have with their brand new VR kit, or that schools could have for their classrooms. Something engaging for children on one side with guidelines on the other. So I've only got one of these, but I am going to pass it around. So it's nicely pocket-sized, because I always think things are much, much better when they're pocket-sized. So it's actually a concertina book, so it actually opens out to a full, almost like a full piece of artwork. But the idea being, people can sort of just take it a page at a time if they want to. The beauty is, it's blank at the minute, but the idea is, so for every benefit on the other side, you would literally just have to flip it over and you'd get the guidelines. So it's literally sort of like an all-in-one guide for kids and adults alike, and easily enough to, yeah, if you want to pass it around, and if you just want to have a little look as it goes round. So in the meantime, I've actually got the original digital artwork available as slides, what I'm just going to run through now. So at the minute, it's just the kids' narrative. So the guidelines are currently still in a very messy sketch phase at the minute, so I didn't include them just to save any further embarrassment. So working title's just VR Superstar. So it's just the idea that it's to sort of let kids feel confident that they can enjoy VR, that they don't have to worry about certain things. So if you want to do the next one. So again, sadly they're missing some text, but that's why I'm going to run through them very quickly now. So this one's about the physical benefits of VR. So this would be promoting the idea that kids, in theory, even just sort of like mild exercise and stretches like yoga, could be done in a nice, safe environment via VR. But also it means they could actually embark on other types of physical exercise, where they could pretend to be like an Olympic weightlifter, or they could pretend to be rowing on the River Thames, or anything like that. So next one. So this is one of the almost finished panels. So this one's about mindfulness. So this is the idea that if children, or even adults as well, wanted to escape for 10 to 20 minutes into a very sort of calm sort of environment. It could actually even be, given the potential of VR, they could create this environment themselves. So if they say, right, I want a park, they could lay out the turf, they could grow the trees, the flowers, and they could even say if they wanted animals there for them, and then they could just sit and enjoy like meditation in a place that they feel is theirs and that they feel comfortable in. Next one, please. This one was about immersive learning. Having experienced VR and sort of experienced the ones where you can almost explore the solar system and the globe, it is literally as if you're stood in the middle of a universe, and it's a very humble feeling, but it's absolutely fantastic as well. This one's all about sort of promoting the idea that it's almost hands-on without being hands-on, if that makes sense. So within a VR environment, they'd be able to zoom in on planets, they'd be able to kind of look up information about very specific satellites or anything like that. So, and this applies to more than just space, so they could literally walk through a jungle and find out more information about the plants that they're seeing, the animals they can hear, and things like that. Next one. Right, so this one actually almost links directly to some of the work Faisal's been doing in schools. So one of the projects was actually combining VR and, was it a type of robot?
That's right, yeah.
A type of actual physical robot that helped children sort of build muscle memory for handwriting. And I thought, well, this would be amazing if combined with something like a scroll. Like if you could pretend you were in Harry Potter, kind of writing on a scroll. It's like, how many kids would actually say no to learning handwriting if it was like that? Next one, please. So this one was actually about inclusive play. So one of the benefits of VR is you don't necessarily even have to be stood up to enjoy it. So this opens up new possibilities for children and for adults with various forms of sort of physical or even cognitive disabilities that would get something out of VR. So say for instance children who have autism, the right sort of VR experience could be as beneficial to them as sort of like certain types of sensory rooms and things like that. And I don't know if they can do it just yet, but again, the potential for VR is sort of letting other people sort of take part or watch people at the same time. So you've got that benefit of kids sort of all interacting together on the same experience, regardless of differences and disabilities. Next one, please. So this one's about having friends around the globe. So obviously with online and computer gaming, you get that anyway, but there's that sort of slight barrier in that it could be made up out of avatar, and you don't necessarily get that same kind of connection, whereas in a VR experience, you could literally look to your right and you'd see you'd see a full-size person, you'd see, it'd still be another avatar, but it's that benefit of actually seeing somebody there, as it were. So. Next one. This is a final panel, so this is all about how VR has the potential to encourage creativity and imagination. So again, a lot of the applications that are currently out and coming out all focus on this idea that you can build within this fake environment. So it's limitless. You know, you're only limited physically by the space that your VR kit will need to use, but in terms of like the digital environment, it is literally limitless. You could build a whole universe from its center to its outer to its outer reaches, as it were, and have all sorts in it: dragons, flying unicorns, spaceships, and everything in between. So the pocket guide on the other side, each of these would have guidelines saying that obviously sort of like using VR contributes to things like screen time, so make sure you monitor your bedtimes and calm down before you go to sleep, that sort of thing. So it's as much made for adults and children. So we'll do the animation next, yeah. So the next thing I was going to show, this is very, very bare bones at the minute, you'll have to forgive me, but the idea to expand this was to actually create a web-based application where kids would learn how to use VR responsibly, how to get the space ready for using it, and various other things. So it'd be an extension of the booklet, but this requires a little bit more time because I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder in the slightest. So if you could just play it, that's looping, fantastic. So this is an example of where kids would be asked, what do you need to get the classroom ready? And for every item that they clear out of the way, they would get points, and they would probably get more points the faster they do it. So it's just little exercises like that again, by creating a narrative for kids, they kind of follow a story from like their school day. So they turn up to school, it's like, yay, we get to play with the VR kit, but we need to do all of this to get ready first. So other ideas in that included about the screen time and about sleeping properly. The idea was that they've got school photos the next day, and if they don't get enough sleep, they're going to look awful. And then the awful picture's going to end up everywhere on the internet, and they're going to be embarrassed for the rest of their life. So it's just that. I think the important thing, especially for the kids element, is creating that sort of identifiable narrative that they find quite funny, quite playful, etc. And then built into this as well, there could be the guidelines section or something just for adults if they needed something a bit less playful, a bit more serious. But I don't know, adults might like this as well. And I think that's pretty much it for what I've got prepared for today. Like I say, in terms of the finished product, as it were, the little booklet is going to get finished, come hell or high water. And it'd be nice to actually get those sort of printed in like a short run and actually have them tested in a classroom environment and see how kids and teachers respond to it.
Yeah, and that's something we're really looking forward to doing as well. So our group is part of something called the Born in Bradford project, which is tracking the lives of 13,500 children as they grow up. It's a longitudinal study, tracking them from birth. And naturally, their lives are going to be influenced by this type of technology, so we can already start seeing it. And this is what we plan on doing, is getting those sort of messages out there, and Amy's work is going to be really useful for that. So we're really pleased to have made this sort of connection with Amy. And this final thing, just before we go, is we wanted to show you a bit of a demonstration of people using VR, but Microsoft Windows decided to update just at the right time. But we do have the system up, and we'll move away the wires to avoid anybody tripping up, but we'll keep the system here. So if anybody hasn't tried out VR before, understanding a lot of this is all very visual, and we haven't got it shown up there. So if anybody does want to try it out, you're more than welcome to. We'll stick around. I'll be here till 3 o'clock, a bit afterwards as well. If anybody wants to check out some of the experiments that we've got, some of the games that you can play in VR, and really sort of get the creative juices sort of flowing and thinking about how you might use VR in your own practice as well. Okay. Great, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.